Like so much goes away when the self-construct dissolves. Like apparently it's like nothing. That very, very subtle, elusive sense of me that can still be there after genuine awakenings. So I'm talking about the eighth fetter, the fundamental I am sense. And it's really more correct in many ways to talk about it as a sensation than a thought, because it's not a thought in an ordinary sense. And at the same time, when you see that the I sense, that's all it ever was. It was a kind of like a sensing thought, but not in your mind. It's like a thought in the mind of God. And something just is seen through there that can never ever come back. So that's the interesting thing about the clear seeing, that when we see through an illusion, it apparently disappears, but we also see that the substantiality of that experience, the I am experience, it was never there. It was never there. And in this case, it means like everything that constitutes a human life, or what is conventionally understood as the human life. So all of that goes. So it's pretty obvious when that happens, in a sense that now you see it for what it was when it's not there anymore. And there are a lot of habits, I guess they're called Vasanas, in our system that were grounded on that fundamental license. And now when the platform is gone, like the very structuring and stabilizing principle that was holding the dream of duality together. So when that is gone, all these vasanas rooted in our emotional body and neurology, nervous system, physiology, they're being rooted out. So there's this clearing that follows, because they were based on that view, that I am view, a view of reality that is now seen to be a thought that is nowhere to be found. So the foundation of the view is gone. So these habits cannot anymore sustain themselves through belief, but they're surprisingly persistent, like hard in our system, almost like programs. I guess that's actually a really accurate way of understanding what they are. And these programs now appear kind of without any unifying principle. So they will die, like they will kind of starve out, because there's something about the indirect reality, if that's even the word for it. There is something about the absolute, and then this old paradigm of ego identification. They're just mutually repulsive, something like that. So when the absolute is starting to inhabit the system, when that false agency is gone, that was grounded on the illusion of I. So all of it is now almost seen to be like a program. And the absolute is this living unknowability that has always been here, closer and close, that has been present in every single sensation and thought and experience that we could have ever had. You know, the unconditioned is just immediately being itself. But now it experiences itself directly. There is this realization or recognition of reality, this self-knowing spontaneity in the absence of self. And the absolute was never identified as self, actually. I think that's a common misunderstanding, because the self is nothing but a set of programs, a set of beliefs, habits, conditioned patterns, conditioned defense mechanisms, conditioned self-protection mechanisms, coping strategies. It's all habit, all of it. And there is no self in there. That's the kind of crazy thing about it. Like, it creates a kind of altered state of consciousness, and that altered state of consciousness, it appears to have a host, but it's like a ghost. It doesn't have any inhabitant there. Like, no one is inhabiting the illusion of self. No one or nothing is actually identifying in that manner, because the absolute is, it's not God in a way the human mind projects what God is. Like, even when we project God to be emptiness, it's just a human projection of something that is absolutely beyond comprehension, something that is, fundamentally unknowable, nameless, and formless. So the I thought is the core program that holds this bundle of beliefs and narratives and views, habits, all of it together. And it's fed by the emotional body, it's fed by emotions, these programs. But no one is actually home there. And you will see that this when you have the no self insight, that when you look back, so to speak, and you can't even look back like in your life prior to shift, because you see that it was never there. There was never time. But you can, for a while at least, have a kind of memory how it used to be, the apparent, contrast, to the reality that this insight reveals or makes experientially possible. And this particular shift is so much more radical than we could ever comprehend, because we are not shifting to a different state. We're not shifting to a different paradigm. Like, all the other changes and shifts that could happen happens within the paradigm of I am. So they are basically different forms of consciousness, different forms of self, some more contracted and some more expansive. But when that collapses, that fundamental illusion, as the absolute experiencing itself directly, it's not a state. That's why it's not something you could gain or achieve, or something that you would need to maintain or sustain in order to not to lose it. It's nothing like that. It's simply the removal of the fundamental illusion, of the fundamental obscuration. So nothing is gained, but so much disappears with the sense of I am, like so much more than we could have ever intuited. And that emptying out continues after the initial shift, because our emotional body needs to clear out these habits, these vasanas, these programs that are in stark contrast with the natural state. So that's the socially and culturally constructed self, basically, that is being removed, and the belief in I am me, that was at the core of it. But with that I am thought goes the whole world, like the whole of reality, like everything. It's not something that exists on its own, like it came with a view. And that view is what is being destroyed. So when we speak about the awakening process as a destructive endeavor, this is what it means, that this view is basically destroyed. And in the Buddhist context, is sometimes called the Wrathful Activity. So there are 4 primary enlightened activities, like pacifying, enriching, magnetizing, and destroying. And the traditional approach goes in that order. That's the so-called progressive path. But the way it happened for me, because I wasn't following a progressive path, I wasn't following a path that was laid upon me by others. Like, my path unfolded from within and was empowered from within, without without it being contained by any kind of conceptual framework. So yeah, it was exactly the self-view that was being destroyed. The self is really just these causes and conditions of the human conditioning coming together. And it creates an apparent sense of individuality that has a apparent uniqueness to it. And when you start to see that it really all was a virtual reality, that everything you thought that was your innermost core and defined you in some fundamental existential manner or at the level of the soul, everything that you felt was the deeper aspects of what you are, when all of that is seen to be a result of programming that has been woven into the emotional body, into the childhood wounds that we all carry. And that basically constitutes this ghost in the machine, like the apparent inhabitation of someone there in this experience of self. So yeah, it's a kind of like terrifying recognition that no self, that there is really no self there. And never was. So yes, it's like an optical illusion. And when it's functioning, this obscuration, this ignorance, it makes it appear as if there is a self inhabiting the programming. So when we live our life moment to moment, it's all the time reality experiencing itself, absolute experiencing itself. But when this optical illusion is functioning, it appears as if there is a self. And that self may then take upon the journey of realizing truth and even have these experiences and openings and awakenings where it realizes that, oh, fundamentally it is the absolute. But there is still the illusion of self realizing that. And that's why it's so radical when you see that that was never there. There was never no one there to have these openings, to be on this journey, to realize the absolute. So, strictly speaking, the absolute doesn't realize itself. It's simply a removal of this fundamental, delusive hindrance. And then the absolute knowing itself directly, which is knowing not in any kind of conventional manner, not in any way the self can comprehend, because there is no intermediary of self there. It's just a spontaneous, self cognizant unfolding. Yeah, that is called no self realization, but it's so direct that there is really no one there to realize anything. That's very, very clear. And in that sense, the most natural consequence or implication of that realization would be silence, because there's really nothing to say. That's kind of the most logical implication. Like there's nothing to say about this. You see that no one is home. The universe is empty. It's just emptiness interacting with itself. And even when the obscuration is functioning and creating this illusion of self, this optical illusion, which is very embodied, of course, like I explained, no one is really harmed there because there is no one present there that could be harmed, that could be actually having that kind of experience, or that could be liberated from that kind of experience. So, what is it that is then liberated? Well, fundamentally, those words lose their meaning because they can only make sense as long as there is this idea of unenlightened state that is somehow inhabited by someone or something, and then the journey, and then the realization. But when you see that there is no path, all of that is destroyed. Like, that is the view, the worldview that is destroyed. So that is what is meant, that there is no path.